It was an ordinary afternoon on a busy American street. Cars passing, people rushing by, and a young mother, barefoot and weary, standing on the sidewalk clutching her hungry child. With nothing but desperation in her eyes, she approached Karoline Leavitt and asked for just $1 to buy a piece of bread. What happened next left everyone who heard the story stunned. Karoline paused. Dressed neatly, holding a coffee she hadn't finished, she looked at the woman for a long moment. The young mother shifted nervously, clutching her child tighter as if shielding the little one from rejection. People passed them by without a glance. Then, without a word, Karoline reached into her bag. Not for money, but for her phone. She began recording. The mother blinked, confused. "Please," she said quietly, "just $1. He hasn't eaten since yesterday." Karoline didn't respond. She kept the camera pointed, scanning the woman from head to toe. A small crowd began to gather. Whispers rose. Was she going to help? Or expose? What happened next no one expected. The mother looked down, humiliated, her cheeks flushing red as the camera kept rolling. Karoline still hadn't said a word. Then she finally spoke, but not to the woman. "Does anyone here think this is real?" she asked loudly, her voice clear and sharp. "Every day I walk past people like this. And every day, it's the same story. $1, a child, a sob story." The crowd murmured. A man in a baseball cap frowned. A teenage girl nearby stopped scrolling her phone. The mother's lips trembled. "It's not a story," she whispered. "He's hungry." Karoline lowered her phone slowly. For the first time, her eyes met the little boy's. Wide, tired, and silent. The kind of silence that didn't ask for sympathy, just something warm to fill his stomach. She hesitated. And then, she said something no one expected. But just before the mother could respond, a voice behind them cut through the air. "But how do you know what's real?" The voice came from a tall man in a worn denim jacket, stepping forward from the crowd. His eyes were steady, his tone calm but firm. He glanced at Karoline, then at the mother and child. Karoline turned slightly, eyebrows raised. "I've seen enough lies on these streets." The man nodded slowly. "Maybe, but have you ever stayed long enough to see the truth?" The crowd was quiet now. No more murmurs, no phones out, no sideways glances. Just the stillness of people unsure whether they were watching a scene or living in one. The child leaned his head against his mother's shoulder. Her arms tightened around him as if to say, "I'm still here. I'm still trying." Karoline looked at the man again. For a brief second, something shifted in her eyes. Doubt, maybe, or memory. Then she said, "Fine." She reached into her bag again, but not for her wallet. This time, she pulled out something small, wrapped in brown paper. She handed it to the mother wordlessly. The mother took it, unsure, unwrapping it slowly, and that's when the little boy's eyes lit up for the first time. But just as he reached for it, a police siren wailed nearby, and the moment shattered. The siren grew louder, and within moments, a squad car appeared, screeching to a halt just a few feet away. The officer inside glanced at the scene, eyes scanning over the small crowd that had gathered. "Everything all right here?" he called out, stepping out of the vehicle. The mother froze, her hands still clutching the paper-wrapped bundle. Karoline stood motionless, her phone now safely back in her pocket. The man in the denim jacket took a step back, eyes still on Karoline. The officer's gaze shifted from the mother to Karoline, then to the crowd. He seemed to be sizing up the situation. like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. Karoline took a deep breath, stepping forward. "I'm fine, officer. Just helping her out." The officer nodded slowly, then turned to the mother, whose face was a mixture of uncertainty and relief. "Ma'am, you all right?" he asked, his voice softer now, as if he'd just realized what was happening. The woman hesitated. I just, I'm trying to feed my son." There was a long silence, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, in the most unexpected turn, the officer reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled dollar bill. He handed it to the mother with a brief nod. "I've got this," he said, his voice steady but kind. "No one should go hungry." The mother's eyes welled up, but before she could speak, Karoline stepped forward again, her eyes fixed on the officer. "You don't get it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't about $1. It's not about a meal." The officer paused, looking at her for a moment. "Then what is it about?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably, waiting for the answer, their attention now fully on Karoline and the woman in front of them. Karoline's voice grew more intense, as if each word carried the weight of something unspoken. "It's about dignity. It's about seeing people as more than just a problem to fix. You don't just give them $1 and walk away thinking you've solved anything." The officer blinked, caught off guard by the sharpness in her tone. He had expected a simple exchange, maybe a few words of kindness, some change for a hungry child. But this felt different. The mother stood still, her child's small hand wrapped tightly around hers. She looked at Karoline, then at the officer, her face a mixture of confusion and hope. "Then what do you suggest?" the officer asked, his tone softer now. "What do you think we should do?" Karoline paused, her gaze moving from the officer to the mother. She seemed to search for the right words, but they didn't come easily. The weight of the moment pressed on her, the choice between standing up for something more meaningful or walking away like everyone else. Finally, she took a step toward the mother. "I don't have all the answers," Karoline admitted quietly. "But maybe it's time we stop ignoring the problem. Maybe we need to ask why there are so many mothers like her, asking for $1 just to survive." The officer stared at her, silent for a moment. The crowd around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something, for resolution, for answers, for action. Just then, the little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, breaking the tension. His eyes were wide, and he pointed at the small bundle in her hands. "Mommy, what's that?" The mother looked down, and for the first time her face softened. She unwrapped the bundle slowly, revealing a loaf of bread. Not just any bread, but a large, freshly baked one. The smell of it wafted into the air, making everyone's stomachs growl. Karoline's heart skipped a beat as she realized what had happened. The mother hadn't just been asking for $1 to feed her child. She had been holding on to something far more precious, something that would have fed them both for the next few days. But the question still lingered in the air. Was this enough? Could one loaf of bread really change anything? The officer, Karoline, and the small crowd stood there, silently watching the mother as she broke off a piece of bread and handed it to her child. The boy's eyes lit up as he took the piece, chewing it slowly, savoring each bite. For a moment, the noise of the world seemed to fade away. The traffic, the sirens, the people rushing by. All that remained was the quiet exchange between mother and child, a bond that didn't need words. Karoline felt a pang in her chest. She had come into the situation with anger and judgment, ready to expose what she saw as an injustice. But now, watching the mother feed her child, something shifted within her. The dollar, the camera, the moment of confrontation, none of it mattered anymore. The officer, sensing the change in the air, took a step back and nodded to the mother. "Take care of yourselves," he said softly, turning to leave. He got into his patrol car and, without another word, drove off into the city. Karoline stood there, still lost in thought. The mother, noticing her presence, looked up and offered a small, tired smile. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing me." For the first time in a long while, Karoline felt the weight of her own privilege. She had been so focused on her own perspective, her own outrage, that she had failed to see the real story unfolding in front of her. This wasn't about charity. It wasn't about pity. It was about humanity. She reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet, handing the mother a few crumpled bills, not as a solution, but as an acknowledgement, as a gesture of solidarity. The mother nodded, slipping the money into her pocket, but she didn't speak again. She didn't need to. As Karoline walked away, her heart was heavy, but her mind was clearer than it had been in a long time. She realized that the answers weren't as simple as handing over a dollar. The real question was how to build a world where no one had to ask for one. And with that thought, Karoline stepped into the crowd, the sounds of the city resuming their usual rhythm around her. But for her, the world would never quite be the same again.